This book contains names and stories of First Nations people who have passed on. At times, it also covers issues of a sensitive and traumatic nature. These are voluntarily shared by First Nations AA members active in recovery from alcoholism, using the 12 steps of AA and supporting others to do the same.
Jody's story. My name is Jody and I'm a recovering alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 1, 2005. I was born in Moree, New South Wales in 1972. I'm a Kamilaroi woman. I have two families. My mother's Mobber Kamilaroi, who lived on the May River in Humpies. However, only some acknowledge their Aboriginality. My mother was not one of them, and my father's mob pretended that they were white just to fit in. My father was a poorly educated man who became an alcoholic and gambled. My mother grew up in a tin humpy in extreme poverty. Mum also loved gambling but only drank occasionally. My parents separated when we were very young. Mum was sick of Dad's drinking. My mother had previous children to other men before me. I have two older sisters. One grew up to be an alcoholic. The other was given up for adoption when she was a newborn. I also have a younger brother. When I was 5 years old, I stayed at my uncle's house, where my cousin's friend molested me. He was Aboriginal. I remember coming home from school one day. I must have been in first grade. Mum said, "We are moving to Sydney." She said that my brother and I would be put in a home in Armidale. That is where I was spiritually, physically, and mentally neglected. We stayed at the home for about 6 months. I wet the bed every night, sleeping in my urine, fretting for my mother. Then one day my dad came and got my brother and me and took us back to Moree. I did not know at the time, but Dad had stopped drinking. He had tuberculosis and he had a lung removed. Dad started going to Alcoholics Anonymous, but did not stay in meetings, but stayed sober. Dad continued to gamble, playing 2-up and running his own card games. Later, Mum came and got us and we moved to Sydney. We lived in Stanmore first and then Woolloomooloo in Housing Commission. I remember feeling that I did not belong. Too white to be black and too black to be white. I even thought I was adopted. Living in Woolloomooloo, near the famous King's Cross, I would lay in bed at night wishing I would grow up so I could go to the cross and lose myself. Also, my uncle worked on the doors at the Pink Pussycat and Pink Panther strip club in King's Cross. When I was about 10 years old, I went to my sister's place and my uncle gave me my first drink of a flagon. I remember thinking, wow, it made me feel good. I felt naughty and I loved it. I learned how to smoke cigarettes from a very young age and often had head spins. I loved that too. When I visited Moree in the school holidays, my dad let me smoke cigarettes. I would go gambling with him. I remember making sandwiches at the card games for him and his mates a couple of times. I would lose myself through food and fantasy, anything to escape how I felt inside. Dad lived with my Nana, who would tell people she was Spanish. Nana always put white powder on her face and shamed my father and me by saying, "You were your father's shadow." Her currency was to shame as well as a food addict. I adored my father. However, today I understand he was emotionally unavailable, and we kids had to fit into his life. I remember him giving me sips of codeine to help with the cold and flu, but often I did not even have a cold. Even when he put down the grog, he still took Beck's powders and Acerapax. At a young age, I was introduced to sleeping tablets. I loved the way they made me feel, warm and glowy. My first real drink was on the riverbank in Moree with my cousin. I was 14. I knew then I had stepped over the invisible line as I could not stop drinking. As a result, my mother had to come from Sydney to pick me up and take me home. Unfortunately, that cousin passed in January 2023, and I still don't know of what. She was 55. When I was young, I remember people making the statement, "You're too pretty to be Aboriginal." I thought people were giving me a compliment when they said, "But you were not like them." I felt like I was judged by white society and ashamed of being Aboriginal. I felt like I was not good enough. I was so naive. I became racist towards my own mob. And just like my grandmother, I would put white powder on my face and act like I was Maori from New Zealand. I would be running around the streets of King's Cross, but really running from myself. Yet I fitted in amongst the liars, thieves, prostitutes, junkies, and I felt right at home. I was going out with a male sex worker from the wall, and I thought I was open-minded, not realising I was putting my life in danger. As in the late 1980s, there was a disease called HIV going round. I used to get tested regularly. I knew people who had died from AIDS, but I was lucky and did not get HIV. I carried on like this for years, in and out of abusive relationships, and eventually met a bloke and moved to Taree, New South Wales. At the same time, I would hear a voice in my head saying, "You are going to end up on the mission one day." But that did not stop me. I continued to get drunk and pop pills. Every time I drank, I would black out. Then one day I went to Aboriginal Legal Aid because once again, I'd been charged with 3 breaks and enter offences. I now realised that I would only own my Aboriginality when I was in trouble, thinking that playing that card would somehow help me get out of trouble. The solicitor told me to go to AA meetings as it looks good for the court. Therefore, I was on a drug program and told to attend AA and get signatures at the end of the meeting as proof. I remember the solicitor gave me a phone number of an Aboriginal woman, which I rang. This woman picked me up and took me to my first meeting at Purfleet Mission near Taree. When I heard them read out the 12 steps, I started crying as I knew my drinking and substance use, plus toxic relationships, would be over. I remember sitting in that meeting, not being able to identify fully, and I immediately went into judgment. I was sentenced to 9 months jail, however, only served a few months. While my boyfriend was in jail, I continued to drink and drug and got pinched again. This time I was given a choice, rehab or jail. I agreed to go to rehab. I remember standing at the train station with a stolen red suitcase, stolen clothes, weighing 8 stone with broken teeth. After all the years of self-abuse, all I had to show for myself was 50 cents and yellow skin from hepatitis C. Looking back now, I know that if someone did to me what I did to myself, they would have been charged with attempted murder 10 times over. Eventually, I got to rehab and thought I would stay for a couple of months to get out of court. Instead, I had an internal transformation, sparked by a conversation with a person I would never have expected to meet, let alone talk to. I was at a meeting and I started talking to an ex-white supremacist. He had changed his ways of living and thinking. We talked about the program and honesty, and he suggested that I might be lying to myself. Somehow his words penetrated my heart. By the power of example, he showed me that the message can be carried by anybody at a meeting, regardless of background. And anybody can change in this program if they have enough honesty, open-mindedness and willingness. Soon after, I returned to rehab and attended the Saturday morning group. It was run by an Aboriginal man who helped me surrender to the program. He stopped the group and said, "What's wrong, Jody?" I said, "I want to stay, I want to go, I want to live, I want to die." That was when I admitted that I was an alcoholic and drug addict. I was 32 years old. I started attending the lunchtime AA meeting in Newcastle called the Walk-In Group, 7 days a week. There were big characters at that meeting. I finally felt part of something and fitted right in. It was like I was sitting with Bayami and I could hear Bayami speak through other people. Early sobriety was a fantastic time. I met a brother boy there. We used to go to the gym and became best friends. He restored my faith in Aboriginal men and helped me to regain my pride and strength as an Aboriginal woman. Also, finding a sponsor and making the Walk-In Group as my home group. A few of my female friends also started a big book study group where we learned about the steps of AA. When I was 3 years sober, I found my family. My sister was dying of cancer. This brought much sadness to me. In my 4th year, I went back to Moree and connected on a heart level with the country. I also visited my uncle and aunties and reconnected with them. That was 13 years ago. Today, I have a strong identity and have forgiven myself and now have peace. As a result, I have found harmony. I have shaken hands with the most dangerous person I have ever met, me. I am now married to the love of my life, and we have 2 fur children who are the love of our lives. I am present and part of an amazing fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with me. I live in the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous and work the program by doing the suggested things. I planned to have my 50th birthday on country, but life had other plans and I got COVID. I've outlived my grandmother, my mother, and my sister. For me, it is like the changing of the guard. I am the spiritual guardian of those women today. I know and believe the best is yet to come.